Welcome to the Evolved Caveman, where men learn to be successful and happy with your host, Dr. John Schinnerer, as he shares the most impactful ideas and practices for you to get the most from your relationships, your work, and from your life. Now here's Dr. John.
Hey everybody, this is Dr. John back with the latest episode of the Evolved Caveman. And today I'm very honored to have with me Dr. Robert Strock. And during an almost 5-decade practice as a teacher, psychotherapist, and humanitarian, Dr. Robert Strock has developed a unique approach to communication, contemplation, and inquiry. Robert's the founder of the Center for Authentic Living, which has distinguished itself as a leading counseling practice for the Southern California business, healing, and entertainment communities. 20 years ago, Robert co-founded the Global Bridge Foundation, whose mission is to work toward a more compassionate, peaceful world by offering guidance and funding that especially address poverty and global warming. Robert also created psychoeconomics, which is a theory and practice designed to integrate our personal financial objectives with our life purpose in order to better align with our highest and truest values. He is also the author of the book, Awareness That Heals, Bringing Heart and Wisdom to Life's Challenges. Robert, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and thanks so much for giving me the opportunity. Really,
absolutely. So tell me, just to get started, what do you look like at your very best?
Well, I had a real dramatic thing happen, where my brother gave me a kidney 20 years ago, so I had a kidney transplant. And so obviously my kidneys were failing. And the transplant itself was relatively simple, but the medications that I had to take, and I still have to take for life, my body received as if I was taking a mainlining speed. So I slept an hour a night for 7 months and experimented in all kinds of ways chemically, because I didn't have a choice with my health and my well-being to figure out how in the hell am I going to survive. I couldn't feel my heart. I couldn't feel my passion. I couldn't feel anything other than exhaustion, emptiness, depressiveness. So I was really in over my head, or maybe more accurately, all I had was my head. And so it was like, what am I going to do? I have my clients, I have my private practice, and I don't have my energy. And I was very fortunate before that time. Had a thriving practice and was able to feel love and caring and empathy for the people I was seeing. So it got clear that what I hadn't lost was my intention to want to be of support. And what I hadn't lost was a mind that could be friendly toward me and have empathic thoughts toward me. And I'm emphasizing empathic thoughts, not empathy.
Yeah.
Because my heart wasn't able to be there for me,
right,
but my mind was. So for the first 6 years, I actually felt no gratitude for my brother. Even though deep down, of course, I knew I was amazingly grateful.
Well, and we know there's a difference between the cognitive empathy or thinking empathic thoughts, as you mentioned, and also emotional empathy or feeling what the other person feels. So that's fascinating.
Yeah. So I thrived on intention and a mind that supported me to be where I was and to support the intention of being present with clients, friends, a lover, etc. And needed to readapt my identity or my sense of how I could care for myself to be, let's say, as content as possible with just being focused with intention to care, and for myself and for the other. And for the clients that were appropriate, I would even share part of the process, because for some people it was obvious and I had that level of relationship. For others, they never even knew. I was able to kind of pull it off. It was almost like being a ventriloquist, because my inner body was crashed and my mind was still functioning, pretty normal.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting, that whole idea of self-disclosure too, as a therapist or psychologist, it's interesting you bring it up, the were self-disclosing part of your story, because the more I've done this job, the more I realize that self-disclosure is a powerful part of what we do, even though I was trained to not self-disclose.
Yeah. I think that's such an important concept. Of course, the disclosing was always relating to something that the client was going through.
Sure. In the service of the client. Yeah.
Yeah. And so at that point, I felt like there was really nothing that anybody was presenting to me that showed that they were worse off than me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had so many ways that I could say, well, as I'm feeling depressed, I still have my mind. Mm-hmm. I can still focus on how do I take care of myself when I feel this lousy. I can still ask myself questions. And then listen to the questions and respond. And yet, on the other hand, we both, I'm sure, understand why the rules are there or the guidelines are there, that if people disclosed, a lot of therapists would just talk about their own life and wouldn't be really careful that when they're sharing that it really relates to the client.
Mm-hmm. So how did you get from this dark spot to being at your very best?
Well, it led to probably 350 chemical experiments. Wow. Where a lot of them had to do with sleeping, because I was only sleeping an hour a night, and pretty well was able to, over the next 10 years, increase that to 5 hours a night through a combination of medications. And then another medication to be able to kind of have me wake up and come out of my slumber in the morning. So in current times, every morning I wake up after having taken 5 sleeping medications in a grog.
Wow.
And that's where I really need to do the self-care work in terms of thought, because I still am exhausted at a level that I can't really high function.
Right.
But I can take care of myself. And then what I found through a series of experiments, a medication that actually brought me to a place where I'm actually better off now than I was before the transplant. But it was a lot of experiments in non-traditional, even though I used traditional doctors.
And so were you still able to function through that depression and that fugue and that fog?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that I really learned is even when you're emotionally really upside down, if you have your mind, you can use your mind to guide you. I could use my mind to guide me to say, well, what really matters right now? Oh, it's the person in front of me. That's what matters right now. What do I want to talk to them about? What kind of attitude do I want to project toward them? What kind of presence do I need to be in so I can really most impact them in a way that would be beneficial?
So let me ask you another question that's kind of related to this. So back in 2010 to 2013, I was going through a ridiculously brutal divorce. I mean, 3.5 years of litigation that it just didn't need to be that way. But they say you never know someone until you divorce them. So I got depressed for probably a year of that. And what I found was that just coming to work and being with my clients, I find very meaningful. And so my work actually was really helpful to come to work and serve others. Did you find that sort of meaning even in the midst of that depression?
I would say that was the number one gift that I had a practice set up. And in a certain way, I would almost say I was borrowing their body, in terms of the fact that the caring for them, even though it couldn't be felt by me, they could tell that I was really there for them. And then being in that state or being in that frame of mind more accurately allowed me to have a sense of relief. And the moment they left, I was crashed again.
Yep. Yeah, I think I'd never experienced so powerfully the weightiness of having meaningful work.
Yes. And we're very lucky because a lot of the listeners, a lot of the people that are there are not going to have that great opportunity. So they're going to need to be able to resource themselves without relying on work that they love. So for them, it's going to be really important to be able to rely on guiding yourself to questions and thoughts that are going to care for yourself. Even if you can't feel the caring, at least you have your mind. I often refer to it as being like Einsteinian, where you can't solve the problem at the level that it exists. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to change your emotions, with your mind, it doesn't work. But if you move to the level of your mind and you have your thoughts guide you, then you really can do that no matter what you feel if you really train yourself.
And to dovetail with that, there was a study a few years ago that looked at, kind of the interpretation or overlaying meaning onto what I would say is some menial jobs. And the environment that they used were janitors in a hospital, and they split them up based on janitors that just saw their work as being a janitor and janitors that saw their work as being meaningful. And the way they saw their work as meaningful was they felt that they were serving the doctors and the nurses and helping patients to get better. And without their job, that couldn't happen. And then there was other janitors that just felt like, it's just a job. I'm just cleaning up after people. But the people that saw meaning in their work got huge health benefits from it.
Yeah. I mean, that accurate cognitive reframing for seeing your own pure intention is gold. And I often say, I'm much more, if you want to use the word proud, or let's say impressed with anyone that feels the worst and is still able to stay focused with a positive frame as to why they're doing what they're doing. Because if you're in love and you're loving somebody, that doesn't require any effort. It only requires effort when you feel terrible and you still care enough to do your job as a janitor, as a street cleaner. And especially, let's say you start off depressed or anxious and you're able to stay focused in the midst of that. That's really admirable.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to have those words in your own mind to guide you and recognize this is the time where I'm impressive, when I feel the worst and I still can take care of business.
Yeah, that's the most courageous, the most driven. You're absolutely right. So let's move a little bit to the book, because I want to get to your book that you kindly sent me a copy of, Awareness That Heals. Fantastic book. So can you give me a brief summary of the book? Tell me what the book is about.
Yeah. I mean, the main thread, which is in the first chapter, is the importance of being aware of what you're experiencing, what your challenging emotions are at one level, and at the other level, simultaneously wanting to care for yourself. And that leads to wanting to care for others. So you have a dual goal or priority where I'm always interested in what I'm experiencing, and I always want to care for myself. And when you can keep those two together, it's absolutely golden. And the book starts with that as the fundamental premise. And then once you are in a practice where you recognize, okay, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling hurt, I'm feeling abandoned, I'm feeling rejected. And how do I care for myself from this place? The rest of the book, the next 7 chapters, are 7 different ways of caring for yourself. And so there's different approaches to support you with that urge to care for yourself. Well, how do I actually implement this? So that's what the book is really fundamentally about.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because the longer I've done this work, the more I realize that I'm exactly with you. The awareness is the foundation. For instance, I had a client a few years ago that was struggling in college, and he would do great in the beginning of the semester. Something would happen mid-semester, and then he'd wind up with all F's and D's. And so we brought him home, and he would come in every week, and he got to that point in the semester, and he had the awareness that his mood was dropping. And he never had that awareness before. And without that awareness, it's really hard to take steps to change the behavior and figure out what's going on. And as soon as he had the awareness, it laid the foundation for changing things so that he could, while he was in the mood, focus on self-care, get kind of minimal to moderate work done, but stay on top of the workload and get through the semester with good grades.
Yeah, I mean, that awareness of where you are is the real hope, because if you're not aware of it, it's going to totally dominate where you are. When you're aware of it and you recognize, I don't want to let this dominate me. I want to find a way to care for myself, get good grades, or be able to take care of my relationship or take care of myself, work out, whatever it is, even though I don't feel like it. It's like a golden two levels at the same time. And it kind of blows my mind. I'm sure you feel similarly that in therapy, that it seems like it should be therapy 101. That of course you want to be aware of what you feel. And of course you want to care for yourself, but it's not an of course. It's like, to a large extent, therapy frequently focuses on what your feelings are and not necessarily the importance of the simultaneous awareness of how you can care for yourself and that you even want to care for yourself.
Right.
When we're caught in fear or anger, we're not frequently caring or even thinking that, gee, maybe I don't want to let this feeling dominate me. But if we can get it like a pink flag up there and says, every time I feel not very good, which is multiple times every day, I want to find a place that cares, and how can I do that? And developing a groove where we're interested in both things at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of depression in men that comes out as irritability. And so you can't address the irritability until you're first aware that, maybe I'm feeling depressed right now, and maybe I don't want to take that out on my loved ones as irritability.
Exactly. And being aware of the depression allows you to have thoughts that, wow, I'm not doing this to myself on purpose, which is the empathic thoughts.
Right.
The moment you have a little bit of empathic thoughts, it helps the irritability not come in and take over, because you have a bit of caring for the depression, and that gives you a little bit of free energy then to be able to be present and to take care of business.
Yeah, and I think even giving yourself the permission to feel what you're feeling. So you have the awareness and you're like, okay, I'm bummed out right now. I'm sad. Let me be sad for a little bit. Let me default to self-care and take good care of myself. Give me some room and space to feel that, and then it will pass more quickly.
Exactly. In the third chapter, the whole chapter is devoted to self-rejection. And so the opposite of self-caring, of course, is self-rejection. And when you can see that your tendency is, I feel depressed. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? And then you get into a riff of rejecting yourself. And it's not even the depression itself that's wounding you. It's the self-rejection. And so instead of the self-rejection, if you can get a higher percentage of self-caring, then you have a chance to really be empathic, at least in your thoughts toward yourself. And then you have a chance to be able to take care of business.
Excellent. So let's go a little bit deeper into needs and emotions. So what's your thoughts on how unmet needs lead to emotions?
Well, let's say you have a need for empathy and from your lover, and instead they're kind of cold. Well, you're going to be bummed out. You're going to be helpless. You're going to be frustrated. You might be angry. And so it's the same thing. Or let's say you want to be independent and your relationship is constantly wanting you to keep close, and because they're too insecure to be able to allow you to be independent. Those are going to create feelings of claustrophobia, going to create feelings of anger or frustration. And so it's very, very important that you can find a way to express the needs wherever they are, not just in relationship with your business life, with your friendship life, so they're not thwarted.
Yeah, and my experience is that, we men are socialized to be self-reliant and invulnerable, which means that we don't really have much experience, and we're definitely not taught to be aware of our needs. So we often don't even know what our needs are, and we sure as hell don't feel comfortable asking for our needs to be met. So give me an example for the listeners of some basic needs.
Empathy, communication, trust, gentleness, basic kindness, honesty. Those are some of the fundamentals that are really crystal. I have a list of 75 needs in the book for people that have difficulty identifying their needs, and 75 difficult emotions. So that for people, we've spent our whole life looking inside in these ways. So we have maybe a relatively easy time of identifying feelings or needs. But for most people, they can't differentiate between feelings and needs. And it's a crucial thing, because when you're feeling bad in any way, it's frequently the exact opposite of what you're feeling as to what your need is. So if you're feeling sad, you're looking for happiness. If you're feeling frightened, you're looking for courage or safety. And so in those sort of ways, if you're caught in the feeling and you don't know what you need, your mind doesn't know where to go. So it needs help. It needs guidance. It needs information as to, well, what's the feeling and what's the need?
Yeah, and I remember when I was in my 20s, I kind of jokingly referred to myself as an emotional idiot. And so I really put some effort into figuring out how to identify a feeling, what are my emotions, how can I tell what I'm feeling in the moment, and then beyond that, what are my needs, and what are my needs in the moment, and then wrote a book about it. But I want to remind the listeners out there that all of these are learnable skills, and they're some of the most important skills that you can learn in this lifetime if your goals are things like success and happiness.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, this is so important that on my website, I have a free download of the 75 feelings and the 75 needs, which allows people to really, that they can carry it with them and never again really be left in the dark. It's really very important, I feel, to be quite precise, because just feeling bad isn't good enough. You need to know whether it's sad or angry or frightened to really have a sense of what way you need to guide yourself to really take good care of your life.
And that website, by the way, is awareness-that-heals.org. If you're interested in going to the site and downloading these, which I highly suggest you do, because again, I think to me, these are basic skills that everyone should have. I think we as men, and typically we're socialized, we're encouraged to be heavy on the thinking side of the mind, heavy on problem solving. And we're never really, we're not even socialized in that direction. We're socialized in the opposite direction. We're mocked and humiliated in the event that we show our emotions. And so we really need to do some unlearning if we want to get to a point of having a happy and successful relationship, which I think is one of the key foundations of a happy and successful life.
Yeah, I think the imbalance in either being totally in our mind or totally in our emotions are equally crippling.
Yep.
So it's really, you need to have a partnership between your mind and your emotions. And that partnership is absolutely critical. And there's a real confusion for men in particular when they think that invulnerability and self-reliance are really going to get them what they want, because in reality, invulnerability and self-reliance are opposites, where vulnerability, when you are able to be resourceful to also advocate for yourself, is actually the source of self-reliance. Whereas when people think of invulnerability and self-reliance as really being the thing that's going to make me a man, that's going to lead you maybe into a John Wayne sort of position where you can be strong, but it's not very alive. It's not very juicy. It's not very connected. And it's not very fulfilling.
That's the word I was thinking of. It doesn't connect you to other people. Exactly. And we have an epidemic of loneliness with men, adult men, at least in the US. And I think that's one of the problems that we need to begin to address. Yeah. So, in terms of getting those needs met, one of the tools that I teach clients would be something like appropriate assertiveness, where you learn to speak up in a calm but firm way that this is my need. In other words, Robert, I need you to talk to me with respect, or I need you to lower your voice a little bit. You're beginning to raise your voice. Things like that. What are some other tips for getting these needs met?
Well, I mean, the first thing is asking yourself, what is it that I need? I mean, if you aren't aware of what you need, you don't have a starting point. And then what is it that I feel as well, simultaneously, which is going to tip you off. Once you have in your sights what it is you need, it's important to I like starting with the name of your show, the Evolved Caveman. The caveman, the unevolved caveman, is someone who is just stuck in their feelings and are just impulsively acting from moment to moment to moment, or just stuck in their mind and they're impulsively acting with their mind. But the evolved caveman, from my vantage point, is someone who really has access to both their feelings, their needs, and their thoughts, and they're able to develop a partnership between those.
Yeah, and to me, it's the difference between reacting, as you were saying, from emotion versus responding from a place of reflection and having some distance between yourself and that emotion, where you can say, okay, yeah, I am feeling angry, and this is the best way to respond to that anger.
Exactly.
Or alleviate it.
How do I find peace while I'm angry? How do I really contain the anger and not just impulsively react, have a pause, and then discover what it is that really made me angry in the first place, that I needed, that pissed me off. And when I can discover what it is that I need, how do I convey what I need in a tone that's not going to carry the anger? So if I'm angry because I felt rejected or I felt insecure about something, I needed to feel more secure. So you might be looking to find the courage that's going to say, could you help me? Would you be willing to not flirt, or what I experience as flirt? Or I want you to let you know that I feel insecure when you do flirt. And I don't know if you care enough to not, but I want you to know it's impacting me. It would really help me if you could stay connected to me in those ways.
Yeah. And, you mentioned kind of identifying what you are feeling. And that's such a struggle for most men. I think Aristotle had the quote some 3,000 years ago that, anyone can get angry at the wrong person, wrong time, wrong degree, in the wrong manner, but it takes some real art to get angry at the right person, right degree, right manner, right time. And it does take some work.
I think that's a great understatement. I think it's an overwhelming, dignified amount of work. The key thing I think that's important is to recognize is that anger, and really all emotions, but anger is one of the trickiest ones, is you're really looking for the exact opposite need of the feeling that you have almost all the time. So with anger, you're looking for peace. And of course, that's a Herculean, task to slow yourself down enough to say, A, I'm angry, I'm dangerous. B, how can I find the need? And then C, how can I convey the need in a way that's not going to just carry that anger and blow the person away? Because you can discover what you need and express it in a way where you're still really, really angry.
So let's go a little bit deeper and dig down into the difference between resistant emotions and vulnerable emotions. So tell us about that.
So vulnerable emotions, as I'm defining them, are emotions that have no fight in them. They aren't against. So there are emotions like sadness or hurt or fear or insecurity, whereas resistant emotions are ones that have some fight in it, like agitation, angry, impatience, frustration. Yeah. And the difference between those two is that resistant emotions are almost always going to create more resistance, where vulnerable emotions have a better chance, not a guarantee, but they have a better chance of being heard. The second thing is that if you look at your resistant emotions, the anger, the frustration, the impatience, if you look really closely, you're almost invariably going to be able to find a vulnerable emotion that's underneath that. So it's really important to pause and say, well, when I'm angry, not only what do I need, but what is it that I really felt? Probably you felt hurt or you felt insecure, some version of that underneath it. And when you discover that softens your heart a bit, makes you a bit more playable, a bit more lovable, a bit more loving.
Yeah, I actually agree. Absolutely agree. I think that they talk about anger as a secondary emotion. I don't think it's always a secondary emotion, but most often it is. And I would say that the emotions that I see underlying anger most often are hurt, which I would say is probably 90% of the time. When I get hurt now, the first thing I ask myself is, when I get angry now, the first thing I ask is, did someone just hurt my feelings? But hurt, I would say insecurity, as you mentioned. I would say I've seen anxiety flip to anger. I've seen embarrassment in men particularly flip to anger, even guilt flip to anger.
Shame.
And so, I think when you start to get angry, to pull back, take a breath, be aware, and then say, what might be underlying this anger is a really, really key skill.
Yeah.
Because I think, to your point, I think anger works to disconnect us. And to your point, I think we're also looking for that connection, but it's not going to happen through anger.
Exactly. And one of the important themes or sub-themes is, it's not that anger is a bad thing. Anger is a great, juicy emotion. It's the expression of the anger that's the problem.
Right.
So it's actually having a friendly relationship with anger, saying, well, it's good I'm alive. It's good I have some juice. Now, how do I channel this juice in a way that's not going to just blow people away? But we certainly not wanting to discourage people from feeling inside what they're feeling.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, to give yourself permission to feel whatever it is you're feeling, but then separate that from the behavior in terms of what do you do about it? Because I've had clients come in and say, they get kind of anxious or nervous thinking that I want to do away with their anger. And it's like, no, not at all. I had a guy that was playing college football, and I'm like, if you're playing defense in football, you need that anger. That's constructive. That makes sense. But you need to be able to shift out of it when you're off the field. You need to be able to have some cognitive flexibility and the ability to shift gears.
Exactly. And you need to be smart enough with your anger that you're not fouling on the football field.
Yeah. Well, it's not rage, right? On a 1 to 10 scale of intensity, you got to play maybe, 5 to 7. You don't want to be out of control, enraged. Absolutely. Just attacking the other quarterback when it's in between plays.
No penalty.
That would be bad. All right. So tell me a little bit, where do you see, what's the goal of all this? So what's your definition of something like success at this or happiness?
The goal really is being able to simultaneously be aware of where you are and care for it. And when you're really in that place, and especially when you can do it effectively, meaning that you're caring for your own vulnerable or resistant emotion, and you're able to respond in the world, you fall in love with yourself and those people around you, because you recognize we're all in the same boat. There's nobody that doesn't have difficult feelings. Mm-hmm. And there's nobody that in their right mind and heart doesn't want to care for themselves. And we're all universally in the same place, but it's so easy to scapegoat the other and not recognize they're dealing with the same thing. So really, I consider success on an inner level to be that. And on an outer level, it's very similar in the sense that you, in your work, you're wanting to be aware of whatever's challenging at work, and then you're wanting to respond in a way that's most sensible. Yeah, if you have a boss that's impossible to communicate with, then you need to learn how to be independent and function. If you have a boss that you can communicate with and it's challenging and you're frustrated, you want to ask yourself, what do I need and how do I communicate with my boss? And when you really take care of business and you get this partnership between the two, you can't help but be successful and happy if you aren't laying trips on yourself that you learned in childhood that are saying you should be making $10 million or $100 million, or you should be the president of the United States.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the definition. So while you were talking about awareness is the foundation. One of the things I've realized that gets in the way of our awareness is the wandering mind, in the sense that our mind often wants to go to the past or the future, and most times to a negative past or a negative future. But one of the things I've realized is when we're in the past or the future, we're not in the present moment. Therefore, we can't be aware of what's going on internally, physiologically, and we can't be aware of how we feel. Have you noticed anything like that?
But it's really the perpetual beginning, middle level struggle for everyone, where you really are in such a long-term habit of thinking about what you regret or what you're afraid of in the future. And once you really become aware of that, you realize every time I do that, I'm suffering. And it's a suffering that has no benefit. Mm-hmm. So once you realize that, you say, I want to be in a place where it's going to create benefit for me, for sure, and hopefully for those that I love. And the only way I can do that is by being really, really present. Like anyone that's listening to what we're talking about right now, don't just listen to us. How are you reacting to us? Do you like us? Do you not like us? And how would you want us to be different? And moment to moment, you really value what is my experience, my genuine experience, unaltered, no performance, exactly the way I am, no judgments. And then how do I best take care of myself?
Well, I think a great question along those lines is, where am I finding my internal resistance to what's being said? Because that to me is where a lot of the gold is. And I'll ask that question to my clients, just be curious about the resistance that's coming up now without judgment. Why do you think that resistance is there? What's going on with that resistance? Because, oftentimes you'll listen to, like, let's say a conversation like this, and you might have some internal, discomfort or annoyance. And the question is why? Like, why is that triggering to you?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
That's where the gold lies.
Yeah, I could imagine someone listening to us and saying, "Oh, these two guys think that they know all the answers, and they've got this glib little thing down."
What a bunch of crap!
A bunch of crap. and then when they look at it, I would just say, "Well, I'd be very happy to listen to how you best would organize your life. If you think there's something better than actually being in touch with what you're experiencing and caring for yourself, I'd be thrilled to listen to you. I'm not wanting to lay a trip on anyone."
Well, and it's and this is not about, to me, what I always tell men is it's not your fault that you have come up this way. It's just how we were socialized. It's how we learned how to be men, but it is our responsibility to find different ways of being.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really something that unfortunately we have to take on ourselves because we didn't have modeling for that. I mean, maybe 1 in 1,000 families, that was the modeling.
Right.
It's going to require some unique reflection on the part of anybody to really be living a life in this way that's not the traditional way of just going for the American dream or just going for whatever you were taught. It's really saying, how many parents said, "I'm most interested in what you're really experiencing and guiding you to care for yourself." I haven't met too many people in my 50 years of practice where they said, "Oh yeah, that's what my parents did."
Exactly.
That's what my school teacher did.
And I was thinking, there was an example I had of, there's a couple men that I've talked to that have been really resistant on social media to this, like, "Oh, the evolved caveman, like, how come I need to evolve? Like, why don't they evolve?" And, it's just, okay, well, what's that resistance about? And my guess is there's some fear under there about learning to change, learning new tools.
Yeah.
And so the resistance is really, I don't want to change because change is scary.
Yeah. I mean, as I'm sure is quite obvious to you and to the listener, we have a country right now where a significant percentage of people are really in just kind of a blind fear and anger. Yeah. And that blind fear and anger is running the show, and it has a whole different perceptual level. So if you're just in blind fear and anger and you don't bring awareness to it, it's perfectly natural that, boy, those people are going to hate on what we're saying. And I enjoy when people are honest enough to say, you're an arrogant SOB, to be acting like you know the answers. And love going into dialogue if somebody would be honest enough like that to say, "Well, tell me how you really feel about me." And then that is a really wonderful moment because we're not just preaching to the choir.
Right. Yeah. And I think we have to get past those defenses, mainly anger and fear, to even begin to have a constructive dialogue about the politics in this country right now. If you want to move into politics, I mean, the basic dynamics of anger dictate that when I'm really angry with you, Robert, let's say, I think I'm 100% right. You're wrong. I'm not really listening to anything you have to say. I'm trapped in black and white, all or nothing thinking. And, people, when we're trapped in that anger, the other becomes demonized. They become all bad.
Yeah.
And it's not a good place to have any constructive conversation from.
Yeah. And so sadly, what you just said is such a snapshot of our world today, of the black and white thinking. Political leaders, our country's good, your country's bad. Our party's good, the other party's bad. And this split and inability to say, okay, where's this overlap where we're all in a gray area? How do we live in the gray?
And how do we deal with our discomfort being in the gray, being in the unknown? Yeah. And it makes me also think, like, how much of that anger and fear is being carried over into personal relationships or work relationships.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's going to be carried over everywhere there's not awareness and there's not really able to find a place inside you while that awareness is happening that wants to care. And that's
the thing that's a problem. Pardon me.
I was just going to say that's a miracle. It sounds simple, but it is one of the greatest transformations. While you're really furious, I want to care. I don't want to act it out. While you're really terrified, I want to find a way to care or find some courage. That requires a lot of repetition, I like to watch tapes over and over and over again, because as much as I know this very well, I need reminders like anybody else. I forget in the moment, and I've got to remind myself over and over again.
Oh, yeah. I'm really thankful for the work that I do. And I'll tell my clients this, that I get reminded of all the tools that I teach because I need them daily. So you're helping me out by reminding me of the tools daily.
Absolutely.
It's invaluable. And we need those constant reminders.
No doubt about it.
The other thing I was going to say about anger that is problematic about it is I think it's a very intoxicating and addictive emotion, because when you're stuck in anger, you're right, they're wrong. There's no need for you to change anything.
Yes.
And that's not a good place to be in terms of growth and development.
I think it's a similar thing, broadening it a little bit, to it's anger and wealth. It's like both things are a form of power that make you feel like you're bigger than the other person. Mm-hmm. And in that place, there's such a tendency to go into black and white thinking and not to be interested in the gray. And again, it requires a positive commercial inside your brain that's saying, uh-oh, danger, danger, danger. You're really wealthy, you're really powerful, and you may very well step on the person that's right in front of you. Mm-hmm. Or you may step on a whole sector of humanity if you're in the wealthy community and not recognize that other people don't have the same opportunity that you do.
Yeah, I think one of the sayings that's a good one to keep in mind is any act that's based on compassion is always a right act.
Yes. I mean, it's
to keep the other in mind, whatever you're feeling is I think it's a key skill and difficult.
Yeah. And I think it's important for all of us, the listener, to recognize that there is no sacrifice in compassion, because it includes you. Mm-hmm. You're experiencing the benefit of it as well. It's not like, oh, I have to be compassionate and then down on me. No, it's we all are being honored at that moment.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with clients in the past about altruism. So, is altruism truly altruistic? Is it one directional? I'm trying to help out someone, they receive the benefit, but then there's this counter argument that, well, no, it's not, that both parties benefit because I get a positive emotional boost from it. And my response to, is altruistic really altruistic? It doesn't freaking matter.
Yeah.
Like, everyone benefits from it. So go out and be altruistic.
Yeah. My experience of it is that altruism and compassion is utterly, let's say, self-focused. You're so included. It's the ultimate reward. It's as good as it gets. Mm-hmm. It can't be performed, and we can't guilt trip somebody into it, because it needs to arise as an urge from within. And we have to be very careful not to say you should be altruistic or you should be compassionate, and really support people just to be where they are and care for themselves first as a stepping stone. And then when that goes deep enough, it becomes intuitively obvious that it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's inspiring.
I think it's one of the best paths to a happy life. Because, serving others, there's not many better values. Because, for instance, two of the millennials' big values right now are wealth and fame. Those two, I guess they're fine short term, but they're not going to bring long-term happiness. Because for wealth, you can always be wealthier. Fame, you can always be more famous. And you're always comparing yourself to others who have more, which means you're always going to be found wanting.
Yeah.
And so we have to find some way off of that kind of treadmill.
The main client base that I'm seeing these later years are people that have wealth and fame. Mm-hmm. And coming because they know they're unhappy. Mm-hmm. They're coming because they know they feel empty. They're coming because they know they went for half of something, but they're missing another half. And there's nothing wrong with wealth and fame. It's just that if that's the motivation, and it's all focused on self, then you're missing the connection with the people around you. You're very likely having relationship or family issues because you're not as focused as caring for those around you. And it's not that you should, it's that being aware that you're empty, and you say, well, why am I empty? I'm empty because I feel alone and I'm disconnected. And I don't want to feel alone and disconnected. So they're guided by themselves to realize, I want to see how I could be fulfilled or inspired, because even though I've got it all, I don't have it all.
Well, and again, I would tell clients, like, this is not your fault. Like, you were sold a pipe dream early on. And the pipe dream goes something like, get good grades, get into a good college, find someone to marry, get married, get a good job, make money, make more money, have kids, make more money. And then when you retire, you'll be happy. And I see a lot of very wealthy businessmen who come to me at the age of 50 or so, and they're like, I'm miserable. I mean, they're completely disconnected from their family and their kids because they've been working so hard for so long. So what originally started out as a value on family turned into a value of wealth, I would say. And the family's really resentful of that. So then it's about, how do you get back? How do you find purpose that is bigger than you? How do you find meaning? And how do you reconnect with the family?
Well, you're giving me an open door, which I appreciate, to expand from the book to move into what I call psychopolitics.
Excellent.
And basically, when you're aware of the challenge of the world and you really realize that you want to care for the world, it opens a door that's a similar door to just focusing on yourself and your immediate relations. And most importantly, it's perfectly natural to want to care for yourself and your family. That's what we were taught. That's a good person. But when you have global warming and you have nuclear threats and you have terrorist threats and you have all these threats to humanity as a whole, that 98 or 99% of focus on family and self naturally, hopefully, will be expanded to say, well, it's nice that we'll have a safer house, but if we don't have a planet to live on, that's a little unfortunate. And for those of us that have kids or grandkids or friends that have kids or grandkids, which is all of us, of course we're going to want to care and increase the percentage of caring for people outside of our immediate orbit.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. So you're exactly on point. I remember I had an interview with Marshall Rosenberg, 15 years ago on the radio. And he's the creator of nonviolent communication, which I know you know, but the listeners might not, which I think is one of the best ways to communicate within a relationship. And interestingly, he said that he couldn't stay teaching people in relationships how to communicate nonviolently anymore because he realized what he was doing was basically teaching them how to get along while everything around them was crumbling. And so he went to higher and higher levels in society. And I think at this point, he's working with, countries that are at war using nonviolent communication to get them to get along, or tribes that have been at war for years to get them to get along, because his belief is that if we don't solve these bigger problems, getting along in a relationship doesn't really mean all that much anymore.
Yeah, I have such respect for him and his international mediation. Mm-hmm. And that expansion that he went through seems like such a wonderful model and inspiration for all of us.
Well, it parallels yours, it sounds like.
Well, I would aspire to that. I'll put it that way.
I think you're too humble.
Thank you.
All right. So in wrapping up, what is the best tool that you can teach men to help them evolve?
I think the first thing is to recognize that as men, were all sold a bill of goods, that a false kind of strength is strength. And once you're aware of that, then you say, well, so what would real strength be? And real strength is not John Wayne, is not invulnerability, and is also not indulgence in feelings. That real strength is being aware of your inner experience and being strong enough to respond in a way that benefits your life and those that you care about. And when you can really get that, you never want to reject yourself, and you never want to indulge yourself in just emotion. You want to use your present experience and the best of your mind to direct you in the way that is going to best take care of your life and those that you love.
Fantastic. Robert, thank you so much. This has been an invaluable conversation. Before I close, do you want to mention any social links? How can people get in touch with you?
Well, I think awareness.heals.org is really going to lead people to some of the information they might need. If they were interested in the book, it'll lead them to the book. It has guided meditations. Those are all free. There's an enormous amount of free information on that site, which is the way it's designed. It's not a profit-making enterprise.
Excellent. Well, thank you again so much. I really appreciate your time. And that is it for this latest episode of The Evolved Caveman. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Evolved Caveman podcast. If you like what you've heard, support us by subscribing, leaving reviews, and sharing the podcast with friends and colleagues. For the latest, most powerful tools to connect with like-minded men, join the Facebook group at The Evolved Caveman. Follow Dr. John on Instagram at The Evolved Caveman, all one word, or join the email list by visiting guidetoself.com.